Europe in the late 19th century was dominated by a handful of massive ancient empires, driven by a rapid expansion of their armies and an aggressive scramble for overseas colonies. Powers like Austria-Hungary, Russia, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire stretched across the continent in rigid, heavy blocks. To protect these sprawling territories, the empires divided themselves into two rigid armed camps. This web of alliances locked Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy into one bloc, while Great Britain, France, and Russia formed another. Fueled by growing militarism, imperialism, and rising nationalism, these treaties created a continent primed for conflict. The pressure was highest in the Balkans. As the Ottoman Empire slowly lost its grip on the region, a dangerous power vacuum opened up. Slavic nationalists, backed by Russia, saw an opportunity for independence, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire looked to absorb the vulnerable territory. On June 28, 1914, that regional tension snapped. A Serbian nationalist in Sarajevo assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. What followed was the July Crisis. Austria-Hungary issued an impossible ultimatum to Serbia, backed by a promise of unconditional military support, a blank check from Germany. When Serbia resisted, the alliance web activated. Within weeks, diplomatic treaties forced rapid mobilizations across Europe, putting millions of soldiers into rigid formation. The diplomatic architecture of the 19th century operated exactly as designed. A localized border dispute in the Balkans mechanically detonated into an inescapable continental war. Germany's opening move was the Schlieffen Plan, a rapid military sweep through neutral Belgium designed to quickly defeat France. But just outside Paris, at the First Battle of the Marne, the advance halted completely. The war of movement was over. Both sides dug into the earth to hold their ground. The Western Front quickly deteriorated into a claustrophobic maze of mud and duckboards, beginning years of grueling, static warfare. Desperate to bypass this deadlock, the Allies attempted to open a new sea route to Russia. They launched a massive amphibious assault against the Ottoman Empire at Gallipoli, but the exposed troops faced yet another disastrous, bloody stalemate. By 1916, generals resorted to immense battles of attrition at Verdun and the Somme. They poured men into devastated landscapes, facing a lethal combination of newly invented tanks, poison gas, and rapid-fire machine guns. Over 1 million soldiers became casualties for mere miles of ground. Industrialization had broken traditional military tactics. The ability to mass-produce defensive weapons drastically outpaced any army's ability to move forward, turning the entire map into an unmoving meat grinder. In 1917, realizing they could not win a prolonged ground war, Germany decided to shift its strategy to the ocean. They launched unrestricted submarine warfare to starve Britain of supplies by sinking neutral merchant ships. This naval strategy quickly antagonized external powers. When a German U-boat sank the British ocean liner Lusitania, killing nearly 1,200 people, including over 100 Americans, it permanently turned public opinion in the United States against Germany. While America moved closer to entering the conflict, the Russian Empire fractured from within. A starving, war-weary populace revolted in the streets and finally overthrew the Tsar. By October, Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks seized power. They quickly signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, agreeing to major territorial concessions in order to pull Russia entirely off the war map. Russia's exit gave Germany a chance to shift all its forces west, but the timing was too late. In April 1917, the United States officially entered the war, injecting millions of fresh troops and immense industrial resources into an exhausted Allied line. Germany launched one final massive spring offensive, but it stalled. Bolstered by the Americans, the Allies launched the 100 Days Offensive, pushing the German army to the point of collapse. Facing military defeat and mutinies at home, Germany signed an armistice on November 11, 1918. The European powers had bled themselves so dry that the stalemate could only be broken by external forces. The Allies ultimately traded the collapse of the Romanov dynasty for the industrial rescue of the United States. In 1919, the victorious nations convened at the Paris Peace Conference. Here, the leaders of the United States, Britain, France, and Italy, the Big Four, assumed the power to dictate the terms of a new global order. The primary document addressing Germany was the Treaty of Versailles. It severely punished the nation by forcing them to accept full blame for the conflict through a war guilt clause, stripping them of their overseas colonies and demanding massive financial reparations. The old world map was completely erased. Under the strain of the conflict, 4 immense, centuries-old empires, the German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman, simply ceased to exist, leaving massive voids across Europe and the Middle East. The victorious powers stitched the map back together by carving out new, highly fragmented states. They created independent nations in Eastern Europe, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia, drawn directly from the remnants of the fallen empires. In the Middle East, Britain and France implemented the Mandate system. They cynically partitioned the former Ottoman territories, drawing arbitrary borders over regions like modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Palestine, entirely ignoring the cultural realities on the ground. To manage these fragile new borders and resolve future disputes, United States President Woodrow Wilson championed a diplomatic body called the League of Nations. However, it was immediately crippled when the U.S. Congress refused to join. Over 16 million soldiers and civilians died, leaving an entire generation missing from Europe. Yet this staggering human cost did not buy a lasting peace. The deeply flawed, punitive Cartography of Versailles merely fractured the world into resentful shards, creating the exact geopolitical conditions required for another global war just 2 decades later.